to our dad on the Jim Cressman podcast.
Welcome to the Jim Cressman podcast, unfiltered conversational exploration, and so happy to have my friend Jackie Ray Greening on the podcast today. Now, if you're not familiar with Jackie Ray, she became the third woman to be inducted into the Canadian Country Music Hall of Fame as an industry builder back in 2018. She started her radio career in Red Deer, Alberta back in 1982, went on to being foundational as a force, personality, and programmer to make CFCW the powerhouse it is today. Beyond that, Jackie Ray is a former chair of the Canadian Country Music Association and a member of the board of directors from 2004 to 2010. It doesn't feel like it was that long ago.
You and I were on it together, yeah. I'm going,
Isn't that
wow.
Crazy?
Unfiltered, hey, we're unfiltered. That's good.
Unfiltered, yeah. So you can swear if you want to. I mean, I'm not encouraging you to do it, but if an F-bomb drops out, nobody's going to edit you're not.
I am a curler after all, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. We haven't even touched on that. So, Jackie Ray, just for context, for people who might know of you but don't really know what it was that drew you to country music and got you started in that business, which you've just been so dedicated to for so long, and you've had such a passion for the artist and the format and the music. What is it that brought you to it?
Definitely, it would have to be my dad. My dad, till wee hours of the morning having scotch, he'd be listening to Merle Haggard and George Jones. And, we had one of those moving couches, that was kind of your record player, your radio. Remember, it was a huge piece of furniture, and he used to put 6 albums on and scratch the hell out of all of them. And it was all of those types of artists, especially the Hag and Johnny Cash, and so that's kind of what I grew up listening to. And then CFCW was a big part of our lives. That was the radio station he always had on, it was a love of. At the time, I probably left home and said, I'm never going to listen to that crap again. And then that's what you listen to.
And then at what point in your youth did you go, I want to be the person who's on the radio? And I mean, obviously you had an affinity for music, but for one reason or another, you didn't end up as a musician. You ended up supporting the industry on this side of it. And what was the deciding factor and force behind that?
Isn't that, I did play the guitar, and my sisters, we all sang. We had a big group, the Pointless Sisters. We had one booking. That was the St. Albert Curling Club.
Love it.
So
who was your agent?
Because we all had family sing-alongs. Because, of course, the cousin, she had the accordion, and somebody else, my grandma was always on the piano. So there was always music in the house. So, but I did play, but I knew I would never be talented enough. But I look back now, and I used to be in my bedroom, talking, pretending I was on the radio. And I used to pretend I was a radio announcer in my bedroom. But I was actually going in to become an RCMP officer is what I was my career choice was going to be. And then I met, I was dating what's his name, which is now my husband. And that didn't really crank his tractor, me becoming an RCMP officer. So I thought, well, I could give radio a try. So I did the correspondence course by mail, the Columbia School of Broadcasting, and that's how I got into it. Yeah, so you
get into it, you love it, you end up working on the radio station you grew up listening to as a little girl, which is pretty exciting. Were your friends and family and everybody in your immediate circle supportive of your career choice? Because radio was something that people, was certainly a celebrity aspect to it. But for many years, it sort of ebbed and flowed as to whether or not it's something that people are excited to be part of. There's the celebrity aspect, but there's also a lot of hiring and firing in radio. It can be very cyclical. And, I can see people who are concerned about you and your well-being, maybe not being supportive. But what was it like for you?
The family, they were always supportive of whatever I decided. I think I look back now and I laugh because there was no women on the radio back then. Like really, there was nobody, but I never dreamt that I couldn't do it. But it was at CFCW, they had finally hired a female news announcer when I was trying to get in there. And I actually got in the door at CFCW as marketing director. It wasn't even on air. But then when we hired Wes Montgomery, they figured I was the only woman that could probably put up with him. So they threw me on the morning show with him that could put up with Wes. And that's what I look back, what people say, female in industry. And it never crossed my mind. I go, oh, okay. I remember sitting at, Mark Woods was my program director when I worked at Q91 in Drumheller. And, we were having a one-on-one, and he says, well, what do you want to do in radio? And I said, well, I want to someday sit in your chair. I'd like to be a program director. Again, there weren't female program directors, but I didn't know that. I said, how do I get there? And he said, well, you should take on, he says, we already have a music director. He said, but we don't have a promotions director here in Drumheller. So, of course, the same pay. I was doing the afternoon show, and then I took on the promotions director as well. And that's what actually got me into a major market, because they weren't really hiring females on air. And I wasn't that good, so I wouldn't have got into a major market at that time. So,
yeah, you had to learn your craft and build your chops and get to where you are today. But it's interesting that you say that, because inclusion is the catchword of the day, right, in society. And a lot of times I think that there's this narrative that unless people see people who look like them or sound like them or come from the same culture they do in certain roles, they can't imagine themselves in it. But you were able to get past all that and go, no, I can speak English, and I'm pretty funny, and I can be on the radio.
I could be on the radio. Lord knows I know how to talk too, so I think I can do this. Yeah, it's funny. People say, but I think to myself, geez, I maybe should have thought that. Maybe I remember. I won't mention the person, because I ended up being his boss. Was when he was. At CFCW, but he happened to be the PD when I first called for a job. And I basically got told, we're not hiring females right now, but he said, you sound like a really nice girl. Best of luck in the business. And then down the road, I was his boss. So,
karmic justice.
Yeah, but he was very nice about it. That's why I won't mention the name.
And he probably, at the time was just following industry trends and was nervous about keeping his job. Like, that the reality is the result's the same. Like, sexism is sexism, but sometimes it's malicious and sometimes it's just people trying to cover their own ass. Back then, that's probably more of what it was. So, I'm sure he felt regretful about it. Did you ever get a chance to sort of take that up with him later on in life?
No, never did tell him. No, and and he wouldn't have remembered, and I wouldn't, because I wouldn't want to hurt his feelings and or anything. Yeah, it's not my style.
Have you had a lot of female radio announcers today tell you that you were a motivational force for them to take up this career path?
Yeah, I've definitely had a couple that definitely, and what's interesting, a lot of them aren't in the business today. It's not it's a tough business. It's, initially you're making nothing. You make no money at all when you're first starting out. You starve, but you get free concert tickets.
You got to get something out of it.
Yeah. So I think I find it more artists. I hear a lot of artists that, that's what I hear more from, that they, grew up listening and really love what they heard on the radio, that influenced them.
And I think it's fair to say that this was a profession for you, but obviously a passion as it pertains to the musical side of things. And you have become such a great friend to many artists and such a great ally in that community. What is it about the artist psyche that you love so much, that you appreciate, that you respect?
Putting yourself out there like that, especially if you're a singer-songwriter. But you think radio's tough. The life of an artist. So you're putting yourself out there for everybody to either love you or hate you, criticize you, and then suddenly you don't. Why aren't you playing my music? I don't understand. And they're putting, everything is from their heart and everything. And some music just works for your radio station, some don't. But I think that's, for me, it's just they're they've got such talent and they're putting themselves out there, and you're really bearing your soul when you're an artist in a lot of ways.
Yeah, there's so much courage as a prerequisite for creativity.
Oh,
right?
That's well put. Well put.
And for a lot of us, I know personally, that's what I'm drawn to. It's like, man, how do you have the stones to get up there and take something that you've created and expose it to the world for feedback, especially these days of social media and the climate that that's often propagated and perpetrated by the comment section. But the fact that people can just bear that down and continue to create in the face of it, just I don't know. There's something very redemptive. There's something almost that feels like a superhero narrative associated with it.
Think about like Carly Pearce's 29 Written in Stone. Have you listened to that album? Where that album, the first time when I heard the EP, it just went, holy crap. Like that was suddenly, she went to, from me, that just was, her first couple albums were okay. But this one just went, boo. And why? Because it came from here and here. And you could just feel it with every word. The songwriting on it was brilliant. So,
and that's probably the best fundamental advice that you can give an artist in some ways, is like, be commercially viable if you want to make a living, but be authenticated no matter what. And I would imagine that you do get asked for advice, probably, especially at the CCMAs when someone's cornered you and they've got a drink in their hand and they're like, why isn't CFCW playing my latest single? So what advice, and I know it might be a bit generic, but do you usually dispense to artists who are looking to make a case to get their song taking up real estate on your station?
Well, and you just put it really, really well. And that's taking up real estate on our radio station. That is huge to me. If I'm going to give you 3.5 minutes of my airtime, let's say 24 or 30 times a week, I want to know that you're invested, number one, in your career. I don't like one-offs because I want to build a career with you. Like I want to work together with you on it.
Well, and why is that?
Because you need one-hit wonders. One-hit wonders are good, but for me, especially with the Canadian industry, where it's so hard to get a profile for a Canadian artist. I don't know why that is still today, but you and I, when we sat on the CCMA board, it was something we always addressed as to how do we get that artist to that level. And I think at radio, we're doing a much better job of building those careers. I think anyway, it's we're all invested in it as an industry. And I can see that with a lot of the radio stations now. We get that we need to help build these artists up, or else we don't have an industry and we have to play 35% of it. So if we're helping out those artists, then they're giving us really good music that we have to play anyway. So I think it's just a great investment of our resources when we can help artists and help them build their careers.
And there's a practicality too in the reciprocal relationship with an artist that you've invested in. And like we said earlier, you're dispensing on-air real estate for them to promote their product. You are helping them build their career. And that gives you unfettered access to those artists in most cases too, which is something that I've often talked about with other programmers, either on the podcast, but mostly in private conversations of, hey, listen, there's no one else in this industry that can take an artist from zero to hero like the stakeholders in radio. But the advantage you get is that it's not always easy to get access to Kane Brown and Brad Paisley and, all these big American hit makers. And obviously you've got relationships with a lot of those people too, but a lot of radio stations don't. But you can, if you work from the ground up with an artist and they become a huge star, like a Brett Kissel or a Dallas Smith, then you've always got access to them to some degree. And that is really important. And that's what I always try and remind programmers. It's like, hey, listen, you're going to need access for your charitable events, for your radio station contests. So if you put a full court press behind these Canadian artists and help them get to the degree whereby they move the needle and people actually give a shit about the songs they're releasing and seeing them in concert, it's only going to benefit you.
Oh, geez. It's a win for everybody.
Yeah. And it seems like the industry has had a hard time grasping that for many years, to be honest.
Yeah, initially for sure. I think it's finally. I think the light bulb has finally come on, and you know, I am going to say it out loud. We have a lot of female programmers now, and they get it. Because females, we have to help each other, and I see some awesome female programmers in our industry now, and I think that's helped our Canadian music industry as well.
So how so in helping female artists get a leg up in country radio, where maybe they just disproportionately didn't get that opportunity, or what?
I think sometimes we're stronger at relationship building than them boys. Don't mean that in any negative way, but I think that's what we are. We are relationship builders in a lot of ways.
I wonder if that's got something to do with the fact that because radio and the music industry in general has been so male dominated for so long, that there is like this sisterhood affinity, right? Where when you see another female breaking through and crushing it and relying on her competence to get to the top, you know how hard of a journey it's been for her. And so there's somewhat of a shared mutual respect. And men are so hyper competitive that sometimes when, you know, I often encounter this in our industry when, you know, a male is kicking ass at one aspect or another in their personal life or in the industry, it's like almost threatening to other males as opposed to something that the rest of us encourage. And so I don't think you're saying anything out of school there. I think that there's a point to that.
Yeah, I think there's just something there. I just, you know, at the back of the day, it was just Janet Trecarton at the Q in Winnipeg. You know, we were the only two broads around, so it's really nice to have this kind of sisterhood happen. And so it's neat to see.
The other thing you see too is as more and more females take up the charge of leading the programming of these stations, it's becoming harder and harder to continue to throw out the accusatory trope that the format is systematically racist, right? Sexist. And I've always pushed back on that a little bit by going, you know, if you study the DSPs, what you find is 88% of the DSPs, the digital streaming platforms, are service music by males singing lead in the country music format, 12% females. So we have a proportion issue. It's not necessarily an issue at the top where people are deciding not to play females, especially if there's female program directors. That idea kind of goes out the window. We have to figure out what it is that we are not doing as an industry to encourage more young women to take up the challenge of getting into the industry, or the industry side, but also the artistry side of this business. And so it feels like to me we have a bigger problem to solve than, you know, just pointing a finger.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I don't know what the answer is. I think I look at the last 3 years. I look at my three favorite albums. You think the ones I play still over and over again. 2019, it was Aaron Enderlin's Faulkner County. 2020, it was Brandy Clark, Your Life is a Record. And this year it's Carly Pearce, 29 Written in Stone, because the writing is so good. Like it's just not the same thing over and over again, which we're hearing. And, you know, I program CFCW, but then also New Country out of Camrose, two totally different radio stations. Where CFCW, we're really lucky in that, we still play Dolly Parton, Tammy Wynette, but then we play a lot of Terry Clark and Trish Yearwood from the 90s, and then the current artists from today. So our female quota is good. And I think we have a more interesting radio station than a lot of FMs because of that female that we're able to add in. Whereas where you look at, we struggle in New Country, Real Country meetings, some weeks where we'll go, okay, where are the females? We want to add a female. Where's the music? And, you know, they're not getting signed because the people see that they're not getting the dang radio airplay. Well,
chicken and egg, baby.
Yeah, chicken and egg. That's it.
Yeah, where do we start? Yeah. No, it's interesting, but I think one way to sort of get to the truth or get to a solution is by having somewhat awkward and delicate conversations around this, right? And I think it's important to dig in with industry experts like yourself who have risen to the top, not based on any specific advantages you received due to your gender, but because you dug in, you did the hard work, and you developed the competence over time. And it's like, okay, what can we learn from people like yourself that we can apply to young people who want to get into this business, who happen to be female, who then can use those tactics and strategies to build a career of their own as an artist? Like, hard work and some of the principles that have made you famous in your realm are transferable to a degree. A lot of your assets that have made you successful are, I would imagine, tactics and strategies that could be applied to almost any business.
Yeah, and I think it's, number one, I'm because of my sports background, I'm a real goal setter. So that's, I always set, benchmarks of what I was going after, what I wanted with it. But I worked extremely hard, and it's paid off. I laugh at this point in my career, and I'm going, like, this is the least I've ever worked, especially during COVID. I'm not going out and emceeing things. This is like been a holiday for me the last 18 months. But just being able to sit and focus on the product's been a good thing too. But you're right. I think it's, my motto has always been work hard, play hard, and be kind to people. And it's funny, we ended up, Stingray Radio, we now own all the stations I used to work for. So you never piss anybody off. There's Jackie Ray's other big piece of advice. Don't piss people off, because you might have, you never know when you're getting bought out nowadays.
Yeah, there's that old adage, the toes that you step on today might be connected to the asses you have to kiss tomorrow. And there's some truth to that. Like, our industry is very small, and there are a lot of people who you will work alongside, or maybe even work above at some point in your career. And 10 years down the road, they might be your boss, or they might be in a position to assist you in whatever it is that you're gunning towards for your next goal, right? So yeah, it is important to sort of maintain this level of mutual respect. Now, have you found that, and I mean, I always find your personality is very jovial. You're very friendly, very warm. But have you found that being a female in a male-dominated industry, you had to have stronger boundaries by and large?
I don't know if I did. I think that Jackie Ray Spidey senses came up in many instances that I never got myself into any situation I could never get out of. But I think too, being so into sports, being a competitive curler, I think sometimes you can pretend you're just one of the boys. See, so I was liked by the men as well as by the women. So I've always been able to walk that fine line, which has helped me in my career for sure.
Being likable matters.
It really does.
It just does. Like, I mean, people should be themselves, and, you certainly shouldn't be walked on or compromise your core beliefs. But man, if you take everything so seriously, and you don't have a sense of humor, or people always feel like they're walking on eggshells around you, it doesn't make for the type of person who usually ascends in a business that's so small, because people just go, that person's really competent and great at their job, but I can't be myself in their presence. And not to say that, you should accept, like I say, egregiously outrageous behavior or sexism or anything. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about people who can feel like they can let their guard down, and do what we're doing right now, have a real conversation about some delicate issues, and not feel like you're going to walk out of the room in a huff if
I know
something doesn't go the exact right direction that it was supposed to, or stay between the rails of political correctness. So
yeah,
you're right. I think there's a big lesson in that, of understanding of, hey, listen, sometimes to fit in, you gotta lower your guard so other people feel like they can do the same.
Yeah, and that's how I tell you what, right now the team we have at CW is just, we're all on the same page, we're all working towards a goal, but we all know to laugh, because our line is, it's only radio.
Yeah.
Really, when you get down to it, that's all it is. It's only radio. And
what are you looking for in talent these days?
Oh, geez. Do you know what? When I started working with Wes Montgomery, and for a lot of the people in the Edmonton market, back in the day, at the heyday of the 60s, 70s, or early 80s, he had a 55 share. Right. So over half the city of Edmonton was listening to Wes Montgomery. So he was a big deal. And by the time we had hired him over at CFCW, so this is the early 90s, and they threw me on the morning show with him, and I'd only worked small market radio. And what a thing I learned from him was just be yourself. I didn't have to be the radio announcer, Jackie Ray. No, I didn't have to be the radio announcer. I'm on the Jim Cressman podcast. Thank you so much. No, I was just me. And that's the one thing that I have now with the team is everybody's just themselves. That's all I want. I don't want you to be a radio announcer. I just want you to be you, because you're a pretty cool person. Greg Shannon, Stella Stevens, and AJ Keller, Nick Golka, like all these people have their own quirky personalities, and it works, for the brand of CFCW. So it's just, the person and personality, I guess, is what I'd be saying.
There's a real correlation between self-love, self-respect, self-acceptance, and the ability to be yourself, which, a lot of people need to sort of like embark on that journey as soon as they can early in life so that they feel comfortable in their own skin. And I have found that in our industry, it's very hard to reconcile that, as much as it speaks for success, and you just articulated it perfectly in your world, because people are looking to be accepted by others. And so they want to know what you like. They want to know what you're looking for. And in that process, a lot of times they lose the essence of who they are. And I'm sure you come across that every once in a while with artists. I mean, I know I do, and I'm giving you an opportunity here to share, because I come across artists sometimes and I'm just like, you could just chill out and we can just have a conversation. Like, you don't need to impress me. Like, that's not where I want to be with you. Right. Like, I just want to have a human conversation.
But don't you find with artists though too, where they're so busy talking about themselves all the time, they never ask about you. So they forget that there's sometimes a two-way conversation, I think, in a lot of ways, and I could totally get why they do it. It's because that's what they do all the time, is they're answering to radio interviews or talking to fans or
pitching.
Oh yeah,
pitching. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and so then that's hard suddenly to turn the knob off, right?
Yeah, and I totally get that, and I don't ever try to make it awkward or make people feel bad, but it's like, it's just easy on the pitch. Let's just have a conversation. This is going to be way less awkward if we just do that. Somebody who has mastered that, and I know that you've got a long-standing relationship with the guy, is Brett Kissel, and it doesn't matter whether he's calling me in a panic about a show or something after hours. He's always right off the top wants to know how the girls are, how Christy is. He wants to check in with you. And that's something that serves him very well, and I think has helped him build some really strong relationships over the years. Yeah,
because Carolyn Dawn Johnson was another one. When she was, she was the other one that was suddenly she'd ask after the husband or whatever, and you just go, oh, and it takes you back because you're not used to that from artists. So you go, oh, they're asking about me. What the hell do I say?
That's so cool, though. That's such a nice surprise.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, totally. But well, if Brett didn't, I'd kick him in the ass. So it's good he did that.
Well, he can credit you for that. So you have seen a number of trends in the format itself come and go. Through the 80s, of course, we had a real war, it felt like, between traditional country and pop country. And then through the 90s, country music sort of hit this zeitgeist where it became almost an all-encompassing pop music format. Suddenly it was really welcomed by the mainstream, thanks to Garth Brooks and Clint Black and Randy Travis and many other artists. And then, we've had the bro country trend, and we have had the singer-songwriter trend. What trend, as of recently, let's say in the last 10 years, has excited you the most?
Oh, God, if you had asked me that doesn't excite me the most, I thought that's where you were going. It's that snap beat. I could just take that, that fake snap beat and it makes me twitch. Please don't do that in the music, and then it just seems the words are all over. I think for me, I would say I love that they're all doing more acoustic versions right now. So for us at CFCW, artists we used to have to beg for an acoustic version. They're all doing it automatically now because they're looking for different ways to share it on their socials and everything. So we'll actually take that stripped down version and air it on CW before we'd air the full overproduced stuff that we get in a lot of music these days. But I think the female singer-songwriter, the Lainey Wilsons, the Carly Pierce, the Brandy Clarks of the world, that really excites me a lot because the quality of the music is so good. I also, it excites me, you look at our female artist category in Canada is really, really strong now. And the boys have always carried the load really well. But you look at our categories now, we've got some superstars in there. You think of Brett and Dallas and Dean and just the strength of things that are happening with Tennille Arts and Tennille Towns and Lindsay.
Megan Patrick and Mackenzie Porter and Jess Moskaluk. We have it's maybe not the kindest thing to say this, but when I started in the industry in the late 90s, early 2000s, you were kind of scraping to round up 5 female nominees.
Yeah, right? You had Terry, you had Michelle, you had CDJ, and
but once you got beyond sort of the top 3, it was like, you were usually bringing people into the category who hadn't had a top 20 hit, right? Yeah. As a nominee.
The Pointless Sisters could have cut something.
Pardon me?
The Pointless Sisters could have cut something.
Yeah, totally. You could have cut something, and if it was Canadian content, you could have had a hit.
Okay, maybe not.
Well, that's the other exciting trend, I think, in the last 10 years, and you've alluded to it multiple times on this podcast, is the raising of the bar for Canadian music.
Yes.
I mean, there used to be a really distinct difference between Canadian content country and American content country, especially through the 1990s. I mean, it was just, even as a consumer back then, I could listen to Q14 or CFCW and go, that's a Canadian,
I know.
That's an American. And one of the guys who really broke down that barrier for me, well, there were two male artists and one female at the time, Charlie Major, where I was like, this sounds American. And Dwayne Steele, his first record, which I think had 3 Canadian country number 1s off of it, and then Patricia Conroy, who, had Michelle Wright as well, but she had been around for a little while at that point. But it was like those artists started to sort of push back on this idea that to be a Canadian country music artist, you needed to be limited to a certain sound and a certain production value. And so let's talk a little bit about that era and what's been inspired since.
I think you've really described it really well, where we'd sit in music meetings and you'd just go, oh, get out of your basement. Please don't record in your basement, because the production was just so poorly done. But now, a lot of them, we've got some great studios here in Canada now. And I think the one thing, if I could say, is we need somebody somebody that can mix music a little better. That's the one thing I think as an industry we're missing, is somebody at that final end. There's a couple of good ones, but I think overall that's one thing where the Americans, the vocals are right there. They're just so crisp. They're so clean. And we still sometimes have a tendency to overproduce and bury the voice, which drives me kind of batty. Because
in a lyrically driven format, that's a bad formula for success.
Exactly. Yeah, it's all about the words. But boy, I tell you what, we've upped our game big time. It's so exciting right now when you those are stars now.
Qualified.
Oh yeah. Totally. Yeah, they can sell tickets, and we've and again, it's been the partnership. We've all worked together to elevate that. It was something, as an industry, we saw it was needed. So between radio and between people like yourselves, everybody is up their game.
Yeah, the promoters and the festival buyers had to sort of take Canadian country music more seriously. And again, not any different than you guys. Invest in that real estate of, I have 6 spots on my main stage on Saturday. How many of those spots am I going to allocate to Canadians? And what type of profile and advertising and promotion am I going to put behind them, right? So the industry all had to kind of buy in cohesively. One thing that continues to sort of weigh on me a little bit, and I want to get your thoughts on it, is and obviously it's gotten so much better. So you also want to focus on the progression. But we still have this American power and Canadian power separate categorization, depending on the station, depending on the programmer. And I feel like that's one of the last barriers we need to sort of break down. But I'd love to get your thoughts on, A, why that exists, and if there's any validity to it, because maybe there's something we're all missing, and B, whether or not you think it's something that as the format continues to rise in terms of profile here in Canada, it'll just go away on its own.
It's a great question. For CFCW, ours is the same. Our American and our Canadian spins are exactly the same. So now I'll put on the new country, real country hat. We have a power category, and you're right, it is only Americans, unless there's a push week and we're asked for help. And then, for example, an Aaron Goodvin would be up there this week on a push week that we will help with those multiple spins. I think for the stations that do it, I think it all comes down to testing. They're doing research, and it comes down to familiarity. And there's the chicken and egg thing again, because if you're not spinning those Canadian songs, then how do you get that familiarity? So it's, I think if the song warrants it, I think what's really bad right now in our industry in Canada, we've had some Canadian songs go number 1, which I personally feel they don't deserve to be a number 1.
Right.
So we're also building a false kind of system with these number 1s. We need to have songs that really deserve to be there, that suddenly if they perform that live in concert, everybody will be singing along.
So let's take out the let's just focus on metrics. In your mind, what type of song needs to achieve what metrics in order to justify going number 1 in Canada? So let's just take a Canadian song. How many streams should it have? What should be the impact? How should it research? What are the things we can do to sort of take that more from a subjective realm to an objective realm?
Well, and there's the problem too with streams. Okay, I have 2 million streams, but has anybody really listened to it? It's just because you're on every platform and somebody throws it on in the background that they're not really hearing the stream. Has somebody committed to download the stream? That to me has metrics. So that they've actually gone out of their way to make sure they've downloaded it to their library. That is way more metrics to me than streams. For us at radio, for me, I like a song. A song really isn't familiar till it's spun 600-700 times. So it needs to be up in that realm before you even can consider that it should be.
Or you can really do an evaluation.
Yeah, because people don't, listeners don't know a song. Until you whack them over the head with it a few times. So that's the metrics to me are. It still comes down to gut in my world too. Like that, where you go, that is a great frickin' song. That deserves to be a number 1. Whereas when they do push weeks, I'll say to the record rep, I'll say, I don't think that one deserves to be a number 1.
Right. You might be able to campaign its way there, but it doesn't mean that it's a viable candidate for it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think, you're right. There has to be hard metric, and we argue about it all the time. I'm not going to lie to you at the radio level as to what are those metrics that deserve it to be, that we push it up, into that bigger category. Because it comes down, I think, a lot of times to the relationships with these artists, like you talked about earlier. We have all these relationships. We're trying to build the star system. So, okay, we'll give the push this. We'll get involved with the push week this week.
Right. And if you see that the artist and their team has an overall commitment to the industry and to a recording project and to a series of recording projects and a sequence of touring along with that, all of a sudden it makes you feel better about your investment. You can go, okay, maybe I don't feel like this is a number one, but I'll let this one slide past the goalie because this artist has proven that they consistently function at a level of exceptionalism.
Yes, yeah. And why can't the Canadians be up in the Americans? Well, let's say Blake Shelton could come here and he could sell, and Thomas Rhett and all these superstars that are in that category, they could easily come and sell out Rogers Place in Edmonton. They can fill 18,000 seats. Can that other act, the baby actor, Canadian act, say the same thing?
Yeah, definitely not.
No.
But again, that comes back to the chicken and egg thing. Maybe if they were in those power rotations. And the other thing that Canadians have is a real disadvantage, and we've talked about this offline over the years, is they need to tour. They need to make a living. So they are, they're more prevalent. It's like, Ron Hosehead Harwood is a bird watcher, right? And it's like, there's nothing that isn't beautiful about a red-tailed hawk, but it's not quite as rare as a bald eagle. And it's not dissimilar in our industry, right? Where it's like, hey, Dallas Smith, Brett Kissel, Dean Brody, Megan Patrick, Jess Moskal, these artists are all awesome. But they do come through because of touring, and not so much in the last year and a half, obviously, which hopefully that builds up a demand that we can all extract on the other side of. Yeah. But they do come through more regularly than the Americans. That's just a fact. And
because it's a big country, but not.
Yeah, right? Yeah, it's a big country geographically, but
sorry,
that's okay. You're popular.
That was Merle Haggard too.
It's when the phone stops ringing because you got to worry in this business.
Yeah, I think, they have to tour, especially you look at Alberta, it's such a big market for them too, and you get why they're here all the time and coming through. But yeah, you and I talked, I remember back in the day when we were on the CCMA board together, it was the television show was really the award show was their only cross-Canada exposure. And
platform.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the platform to have them, we don't
have a Good Morning America. We don't have a Jimmy Kimmel. We don't have a Tonight Show. We have the Canadian Country Music Awards, which is once a year.
Yeah.
And that's part of our problem as well. And I, again, just being honest with you, I worry as we focus that award show on evaluations other than what exists in a meritocracy, right? And through diversity and inclusion, which I believe is important. But if we don't end up with compelling television at the end of it, not to say that you can have compelling television with diversity and inclusion. I believe that. But if you get the formula a little bit wrong and your ratings start slipping, we could end up losing our platform altogether. And so again, there's been some awkward conversations at the talent committee level, and I'm sure at the board level, where we need to make sure that whatever that balance is, we get it right.
Yeah. Yes. Well, and it's hard. Like award shows, ratings haven't been setting the world on fire. But then also that is why a city pays a license fee of $1 million for the CCMA to come there. So it's if I want the CCMA awards to come to Edmonton, which I do, I want that cross Canada exposure that an award show brings. So it's extremely important that they find the formula to make it an awesome show, that they have the eyes watching it, so that a city will continue to want to host those shows.
Yes. Yeah, totally makes sense. We need to make sure that we don't accidentally throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah.
Yes, all for diversity and inclusion. I love the fact that we have more females rising to the forefront, but we need to make sure that our foundational motivation is to protect the platform by making compelling television that drives viewers in to watch this product, because if we lose it, it's the last one we got for now.
Yep.
So
Well, I agree with you.
Hopefully we can continue to strike that balance and do it properly. Let's talk a little bit about curling. I grew up in rural Alberta. And you are, I mean, other than country music and radio, that is definitely one of your top passions. Where did that start?
Again, my mom and dad, big golfers and curlers. And so, yeah, they as soon as I turned 12, I got to join the girls' league down at the St. Albert Curling Club. And what's fun is I still play there, even though I'm not competitive curling anymore. I still play there every Monday night with my girlfriends that I played with when we were 13 and 14 years old. And they're as bad as they were when we were 13 and 14. And I tell them,
and you're so much better. I'm sure.
Yeah, but it was funny because I left for a lot of years because we were competitive curling. So I was at 3 Scotties Tournament of Hearts, and but I'm lucky in that I'm one of those people that I don't have to. It's okay for me to not be competitive and have not a great team, but they drink good wine, so that's all that matters.
I don't think people who live outside of rural Alberta or maybe rural Canada, to be a bit more inclusive on that front, understand how a curling club is like a backbone social hub for a lot of these small communities, right? Like it is just so imperative for these little communities to get people together a couple times a week or even once a week and have them have a few glasses of whiskey and a couple of beers and throw some rocks down the ice. I mean, I never got into curling myself, but I used to go when my parents went, and it was always a blast. And it's one of the things that really ties communities together in rural Alberta.
Huge. And for me, I grew up in that curling club. That's even with mom. She used to curl Tuesday, Thursday afternoons. Even when we were us 4 kids were all babies, they had babysitting services. So we were going there when we were 1 year old. So it's been in our family a long time, and good history to it. And it's just like walking into the Cheers bar. Everybody knows your name, and it's great. I just still love it. Though the knees don't love it some days.
Well, fair enough. But part of the way to keep them honest is to keep them active, right? So
very true.
The more you do it, the more they'll loosen up. Well, listen, Jackie Ray, we've been almost an hour. This was amazing. Thank you for your tireless dedication to our industry, your passion for all the artists, all the service you've done through various committees and boards and everything you do for this business. We're really fortunate to have you.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This has been just an awesome conversation, which we'll have to carry on over a drink someday. Because
I'm in.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Jim.